Skype by David Hearst, who's the editor-in-chief of Middle East Eye. David, great to see you again. David, do you think there'll be any fallout from this story in the UAE itself?
I think they'll be extremely upset by it. I think possibly some of the stuff that's been going on is a sort of inverted compliment in a sense, that if these people literally target people like you and me as being setting so much of an agenda which is creating instability, it means that actually we're doing our job as journalists. Part of this is not simply just about the UAE and Qatar, it's also about Egypt as well. And if you remember, there were statements made when Trump was in Riyadh about as they called, the Muslim Brotherhood-inspired leaks. There were leaks indeed, very, very embarrassing leaks about conversations between Egyptian officials and Saudi officials as well, about the money that was being poured into Egypt. I think what we collectively represent is a counter-narrative, is saying that the Arab world really does need democracy, it really does need some sort of accountability. And there are some states in the Arab world, particularly now, unfortunately, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, who are absolutely fighting this agenda. And they want to shut us up. It's not just Qatar. They want to shut Middle East Eye up. They want to shut Al Jazeera up. They want to shut Mada Masa up, for instance, in Egypt. They block all these websites and whatever. So it isn't simply just a question of a spat between two Gulf states. It's also about independent journalism. It's also about the ability to hold anyone in the Middle East up to some sort of accountability and transparency and light. And that's what they're really fighting. It's a media war. You could say, well, what effect does it really will have on policy? I think it has quite a large effect on policy, and I think we're absolutely right to highlight all these back channels. And I think there'll be further revelations to come, particularly, I would say, about contracts, about money. This thing just doesn't happen on its own. These foundations require lots and lots of money. Journalists require money as well. I'm not saying journalists are being bought, but money is involved. And I think we'll see a lot more to come about the sheer amount of energy that the UAE and Mohammed bin Zayed in particular has put into buying influence in Washington.
It's interesting to think, and my colleague Patty Culhane mentioned earlier, why would a pro-right-wing organisation in Washington work with the UAE? What do they have in common? I'm thinking of a kind of a simple way to spell that out for some of our viewers who may find this, rather complicated to understand. And of course, seeing that kind of dirty underbelly of politics in the cold light of day. I mean, what is it that they have in common? What's the end game?
Well, what they have in common is they have a horror of the Arab Spring, they have a horror of democracy, and they have a horror of popular revolutions. They tie all this up and say all Islamists are bad. They say they're all terrorists, even the ones that are actually fighting militant Islam and Daesh. But they have a very concrete neoconservative agenda. It's the same agenda which is now turning its wrath on Iran, and it's the same agenda that believes that the Muslim Brotherhood is the source of all evil. I mean, and we both know that this is a real exaggeration, that the world is much more complicated and nuanced than that, and it can't be a question of just simply, dividing the world up into good guys and bad guys. But there is an agenda here, and I think what's happened is that the Emirates and one clan in the Saudi royal family, I don't think it's everyone, indeed. In fact, I would say that the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, the man who's next in line to the throne, who is Mohammed bin Nayef, disagrees with this completely. But he's staying very, very silent at the moment. So what you've got is a clan in Saudi Arabia. You've got a clan in the Emirates, by no means all of them, and the ruling elite in the military dictator in Egypt, all saying now is the time to finish the job, and the job is to crush the opposition. The job is to crush democracy. The job is to crush a free press, and they think they can do that with Trump. I don't think any of this will work. I think all of this is backfiring, and the story today is one big backfire for them, because if you were outside this particular maelstrom in the Gulf, and you were viewing this from the point of view of an undecided senator, Republican or Democrat in Washington, you really wouldn't want to be involved in this. This would hurt your reputation if, for instance, it got out that you were accepting money from the United Arab Emirates.
David Hearst there joining me via Skype. David, thank you. Still to come on Al Jazeera. Voters in Lesotho go to the polls for an election called after a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister.
Hello, it's nice and warm and sunny.